we were talking about the SQL, the connection string that we have to refer to whenever we do any task with the database. We saw the syntax, how the SQL, the connection string, how it looks like, and we saw two solutions. Whether either we have to specify it within a C# file, like this one we see in front of us now. We generate actually a SQL command, a SQL connection, let's say variable, user-defined variable. Then after we define the data source. The data source is comprised of three main components. They are not unique. The data source itself, actually the path to the database name of the database, the entity we need. Then after the security, let's say support, provided we need the identification of users to utilize the database or not. Then we said that there is another syntax how we can read this way. Before this way, actually it has to be identified, and it has to be actually utilized at the beginning of each C#5 whenever you need to interrogate the database. Yet we may refer to another solution, which is actually defining a global variable, which would actually be utilized in the web config file, which would be utilized actually the variable itself at every place you need a connection to the database. So you do not need to regenerate the connection string again and again. You just call the connection variable you generated in the web.config file, and you utilize through the web configuration manager tool, which is from the system web namespace. This way, actually, we may utilize the database in question as many times as and when wherever we need within the project, whether the scope that it is controlled by the web config in question, the file where we define the variable, the connection string variable. Then the connection actually to be utilized, actually we define the path. We define that we are going to have a connection with the database. That's true. And then after to pass any query, SQL or any other, whether actually it is a connection, let's say connection based or connected based or disconnected based, we have to specify that we will start the communication with the database by mentioning that the connection string we are going to utilize, yeah, this is the one, that the connection string we are going to utilize has to be actually opened. We do whatever we want after the connection, after the startup of the connection. We do whatever we want. We insert, we select any query, any command we are going to trespass. We are going to pass it to the database after the opening of the connection. We do any without restrictions. You have to respect the rule, the syntax, and you do whatever you do after the opening. Once you terminate your communication with the database, you have to finalize the connection. To avoid any security issues, you have to terminate the usage of the connection string. Means utilizing the database, actually any solution in background or in backend, we have to specify a connection string. Then we open the connection string whenever we need it. We specify the connection string. Khalas, we have a tool to connect, but we open it to use it. Then we close it after the use. We start using, so we open it first in prior. We terminate, we finished the deal with the database, then we terminate the connection. So it's a context of understanding here. It's not technical. So it's technical, yeah, because the open and close, they are two predefined methods. But it is a common sense. We are not going to make the connection open for all and for everybody, once for all and for everybody. No. Only when needed. Then after, actually, due to that, we close it once not needed. The context of passing a select query. The context of passing the select query means, actually, remember that we talked about the connected and disconnected mode. So we are dealing with different perspectives whenever we get connected to the database. A SQL, actually, a statement has to be passed to the database containing, let's say constituting all the information actually you need to retrieve from. Select star from, or select the name, select the last name, select whatever. You build up your query. You build up your SQL query. You build up your SQL query. Meaning the syntax of the SQL is the habitual SQL, let's say, query. Select star from table. select ID, comma, name, comma, and so on. You build up your query. Then after an object actually from this database would be executed, let's say, to generate your output. A data reader or data set, whether it is in a connected mode, come on, or it is in a data set, so it is in a disconnected mode, would actually hold the retrieved data, the result of your query. In connected mode, there is a data reader object, or in disconnected mode, there is a dataset object that would actually store what the SQL query or command would retrieve for you. This is in brief. This is in brief. We generate a SQL command object after the connection string and after starting the connection string. Now we talk about the select query. We are going to retrieve something from backend. We are going to fix the path, and we specify that the connection string is tell and tell, and based on that we are going to utilize it. So the connection is going to be utilized. So here it is. To specify the SQL, yes, we need it because we're going to execute something now. So the execution is via the use of a connection that has been already opened. So this variable here, if we come back, it is the same that we opened earlier, that we opened here, that we opened here. It's the same. So we are going to utilize it now for interrogating using the SQL. We are going to retrieve data. A command object. See the syntax? This is a predefined class. This is a predefined class. We are given a user-defined name to a command, which this command here will hold the value of the SQL query. This command actually, it is a new object from the same class. It's a syntax. It's an OOP. It's an object-oriented programming context. This command actually we are going to utilize over the connection string already opened earlier. Then this same command is holding a text. It's a predefined keyword, command text. The syntax, you have to respect it. And this text, it is in between two double quotations. It's text, no, text. What is the text? It's the SQL query. Select star from authors, and we are making an order. We build the SQL query. I come back. The SQL, you have to build it. It's your own. We don't care actually. The system will not tell you no. Don't. Since the SQL query is correct, you specify it here in between those two double quotations. This object actually that holds the select, that holds actually the content that you want to execute, which is the retrieval of data mainly, would be executed and has to be actually executed and needs to be executed on the database itself. Means this select here, where it would be executed. What is this author? It's inside the database, so it has to be executed. An object from that this SQL command has to be actually to be executed on the database itself. What does the object from the SQL command hold? It is holding the text, which is the SQL itself, the SQL query itself. And this block would be executed, once one of the methods responsible for making the execution is called. This text here, this query, this select star from, whatever, this full query would be executed once one of the predefined execution responsible methods is called. Here it is. What does it mean? It means there are predefined methods responsible for executing the query. This is the text, no more, no less. We are going to send the text to the SQL server, to the back end database. We are sending a text. The SQL server does not understand what is the text. Thus, this text has to be executed as a SQL query To do so, there is a predefined method. Actually, there are 3 types. We are going to see them now. One of them has to be executed, has to be called to execute the text we send to the SQL server. Usually the connection has to be actually mentioned, no more no less. Means without the connection specifier, we will not be able to send to the database whatever we want. The mode via which actually the query has to be sent, it is said an inline text. The mode via which we are able to see the query sent to the database, it is said to be an inline text. We may have actually other source and forms, but mainly we say in this way here. Actually, we are just specifying a connection. Then after we generate the query text, and then after we execute it using a method, it is an inline text. We might have other forms, but it is a way how to execute. How? From where? From inside the SQL server, from outside the SQL server, like we use specified and dedicated procedures and so on. And because of those modes only, because of the variety of modes via which we may specify the area from where we launch a query, an SQL query, let's say, there are actually a capability given to the object here. We specified earlier that there is an object that has to be actually sent in the text to the SQL server. This object here, this object which is actually the SQL command, defining the connection, and it is sending the text to the SQL server. It is actually having the potential to specify whether a user can execute a query from within the front end, like let's say Visual Studio, or not. Front end, he may use the stored procedure, yes or no, he can do or not, and so on. Those are the capabilities of this object. Those are capabilities of this object. What is the object here in question? It is the let's say the component responsible for carrying the command, which is sending the text and carrying the text over a connection we specified earlier. It is, we are giving it the name here, we are specifying it, we are using the word object to specify that. Then at the end, the executed object has to, since we are talking about actually a select query, we are talking about select, so the executed has to retrieve data and display to the user, to the end user. Whether it is in a connected mode or disconnected mode, there is an object from data set, if it is disconnected mode, or an object from the data reader, if it is in a connected mode, to store the result returned and retrieved from the database using the object in question. This is an object, and this is a different object, completely different. This is an object that defines the command sending the text over a connection string. It is defined at the early age, and this is another object to store the result retrieved from the database using this first object. But what is the object? We are going to see different, let's say, objects. Remember that we are classifying them into 2 groups, whether we are dealing with a disconnected mode objects, means we are going to utilize the local memory, the cache in local, and the local browser, local client, to store the results, and we are going to utilize them accordingly. Or we are doing a direct connection, we are having a direct memory access in a connected mode, so we are interrogating the database directly. The data would be retrieved from the database itself, data reader. Executing, I come back, executing this block here, we need actually a fire to execute this block. We specify the connection string, yes, here it is, and we are specifying the query, yes. Now this text to be executed, there have to be actually an object, I may say, it's a function mainly, to be called to execute this block here on the database, to be executed on the database. to be executed on the database. Good. Those objects, those methods, or those objects, they are free. We have actually, we'll define them one by one. The execute Scala, it's one predefined method that we can utilize to execute queries, mainly, and this one actually it is to be utilized for the case where we are dealing with a unique value data, or unique value based, let's say, component, to interrogate the database, to insert only one component, or to retrieve one component. For example, we need the price of a product. We need the price of a product, not a list of products. So to retrieve such unique value, we use the execute Scala to execute the preset command text. I repeat, execute Scala, execute non-query, execute reader. Those are three predefined methods that you may refer to execute SQL command texts. Whatever the text is. In this example, we are dealing with the select only. But whatever the text is, we are going to fire a predefined method to execute the text. This text here, actually in this example, if we are willing to retrieve one unique value, the text is going to be retrieved, for example, is the price of a product. The price only, the price, sir. So it's a one value. The best fit in the predefined method for such task is the execute Scala. Remember that we are having a connection we already opened, and we are passing a command text to the database. So this one is going to be passed to the SQL server. To execute this query here, the SQL server will not understand the text. No, completely not. Thus, it has to be transformed into an SQL statement. To transform a text into an SQL statement, we need one of those three predefined methods. Those three predefined methods, they are completely different. We are not going to utilize them, the three. No, one of them only. The program will support only one, not three. Which one to choose? It's according to the definition. The first one, it is to deal with unique values. I give you the example, the product name or the product price, to extract just one value. So the best fitting to execute the text of a SQL query sent to the SQL server, here in this case, they execute Scala. Based on your this شبكة ضعيفة, it's with you, Iman. It's from your side. I'm sorry. Yeah, it's from your side. Even though the recording is going, no, don't worry. So the recording is going. You can refer to that. So the recording, you'll find it later, Iman. You can refresh, or you can just re-log in. It is the internet problem from your side only. Yeah, I continue here. The execute non-query, actually here we are going to deal with the totality. Mainly here we are going to deal with a variety of queries. We are going to deal with a variety of values to send and to retrieve. All the DML or the DML queries we are going to you think to utilize with the database, they are supported with this execute non-query method. So since we are not having any specific value to retrieve, we may refer to the execute non-query to fire the SQL text, the SQL command text. So the text of the command here in this example here, it's an insert. And this insert, it holds many values. 1, 2, 3, 4. And it is based on a connection. So we're going to pass the command based on a connection. This command here, it is given a name. This CMD is shortcut to command. It's user defined. You may write whatever you want. But once you specify it here, you use it to specify the execute method. In this case, execute non-query. We are not dealing with one value. We are dealing with actually a full statement with a lot of values. In this example, we are having only 4 values or 5 values, but we may have of more than that. Even we may have less than that. Still, this execute on query can work. I can do that. Can carry the command text to the SQL server. Okay, once when we talk about the execute reader, the third one actually, the execute reader here, this one, it is a context of a connected mode interrogation to the database, and via which we are going to interrogate the database back and forth. What does it mean? Means, for example, we are going to retrieve entities from two tables using one unique query. We are going to retrieve values from 2 tables from the same database using the same query. So we are going to interrogate the database back and forth, retrieve the first, and then after we go retrieve the second. The execute reader is one of the examples, because it is going to iterate the work in between the front-end solution and the back-end solution. Yes, the execute reader does that. It is in a connected mode. It supports that. Means it will let the user display the thing the thing is a multi-value to be retrieved from the database, from the back end. It would retrieve the first value, then after we go back to the database and retrieve the second, and if there is a third, it will go back also retrieve the third, and so on. It would do an iteration in between the ASP.NET front solution and the SQL Server, the database back end solution. It would do the iterations as many times as it is required by the query. So the execute reader is a good solution for that. When we said that the execute reader, it would do actual iterations with the database from front end to the back end, means there are responsible actually methods or predefined methods that would help us to go and come back and forth from front end to back end to retrieve the data or to reinsert the data, whatever the query is. Here we are dealing with the SQL command because it's a good example to make you understand. Thus, the data reader here, the data reader is one of the objects. It's one of the objects that would help the let's say execute reader go back and forth here to retrieve the data from the back end and give it to the front end solution. The data reader is an object to be available at the client's space to store what the execute reader retrieves. It is one of the tools to utilize in the connected mode. So the data reader, it is in a connected mode. Yes, it would retrieve the data, whatever required, actually, one value, many values, let's say, whatever the value is or list of values is, and then after terminate the connection, it's the data reader role. So the data reader would help actually to store the retrieved data from the back end, store it locally in the client side, and then after terminate the communication with the database. And whatever has been stored here would be utilized by the client to display and render the values to the end user, to the front-end solution, to the ASP.NET solutions. It's not actually, we can deal with the data reader in a graphical mode. Remember that this actually data reader is one of the .NET solutions. We may deal with the data reader in .NET in a graphical and visual environment. It provides better performance than the data set. Actually, some contexts that because the data set also it's in a disconnected mode, and it helps us to use the local cache memory or the local browsers or the local client's memory to make the work faster than usual. This data reader, it is in a connected mode, yes, but it is given a better. It means it will consume more time when it waits for the object to retrieve the data from the back end to store it here locally. still it acts when the data is stored inside the data reader and finished. It is خلاص retrieved. It would act much more better than the data set. Performs measured by time. Performs here measured by time. Yes. Differences we see between the data reader and data set here means actually disconnected mode and connected mode. This is a table actually available for you, so refer to it please to just visualize the differences between the connected mode and the disconnected mode. Connected mode we use a data reader. Disconnected mode we use a data set. So here's a data reader, it's one word. There is no space. Data reader and the data set. Those are two libraries. Those are two namespaces that they hold functionalities to help the task be done. Connected mode, data reader. Disconnected mode, data set. Better performs actually when we talk about just quality of retrieving the data, punctuality, scalability. But here lower performs because it is using the locally stored data. Updated data in the database won't be seen in a disconnected mode unless we do a refresh from source. Because of this, we say lower performs. Does not mean it does not work. No, it works very fine. Yet, when we deal with the local memory, the updates done in lifetime to the database won't be seen by the dataset. These are for an example only. So refer to that, please. Refer to that in your reference. Okay. This is an example actually via which we are going to let's see the way how to retrieve the data, and then after we are going to fill up a list box. From the .NET objects we saw in unit number 1, a list box is one of the .NET, let's say, solutions. List box. It's a control via which we see list of values displayed all together, one on top of the other. Value and text, value and text, value and ID, value and ID, or ID and text, and so on. So there are lists of values to be displayed on top of each other. Let's do so. Let's do so. Here in this context, we are dealing to launch this list box to fill up all the data and to pop up the data at the load event. What does it mean? The event handler, the role actually, the function that would actually retrieve the data is the load of the page. Once the page has been loaded, everything would be executed. What it is existing in between this curly brace and this curly brace would be executed at the load of the page when the page is loaded. An object is given the name list author. This is a control, which is a list box. Control inside the front end page. Control front page, front end page graphic. Given the name list, it's an object name. Object name, like we say text box, like we say label. So list author, it is given manually. Right click, properties, text, we change it to list author. It's a name. The components of this list box is cleared. Means now we are sure that this list box is empty. Nothing is there. Nothing is there. And we start filling up the data. So the list box is set and it's empty. The connection string priorly set, this is from the web.config file. The syntax using the configuration manager. So it's from the web.config. Good. Now we build up the query string, the query text. select author name, first name, ID from the table of authors. 3 values, value 1, value 2, and value 3. Good. Actually, we are using the ADO object. It's a driver. Remember, the connection has to be done actually through either a driver or provider. So in this context, it's a driver. Good. The connection, we'll utilize the connection string, which is here. This is the one, sorry. Yes, not the connection string. And this connection string is given a name con. It's user defined con. So the command will be passed using this con. The command content is this text select SQL. The command given the name CMD, which is having the text select SQL, and using the connection con, which is here. An object command given the name user defined CMD, which is a new command. Yes. What is the text? This is it. What is the connection string? This is it. Yes. Then we are going to refer to a reader to read the content of the CMD. Whatever this one has retrieved, we generate a data reader, a SQL data reader object, a SQL data reader object to retrieve the data. This is a user defined, the word reader, but this is no, this is a predefined class. SQL data reader. Using the connection, we are going to retrieve the data and pop up the list. So we open the connection. The reader we just defined earlier, which is from the SQL data reader we are going to use to store the data, retrieve data, is going to execute what the CMD is having. Yes, the SQL text based on the connection. So let's execute it now. Execute reader. So in this example, we are making a direct connection to the database, and it will go actually an iteration to retrieve the data. So while the reader, this reader here, is still having data, this statement here, while the reader is still having data, we will execute this block. What is this block? We are creating a list item. This is in code. And this list item object will have to store the data retrieved from the database. The last name, the first name, the ID. How? This is it, the list, text, last name, value, ID, and we are not, here in this example, we are not using the first name. So we are using only the last name. Yes, it's okay. So we are using only those 2 values. We may add other things, but for now it's okay. So the first name is the thing to be displayed, and the identifier for this last name is the ID. Then what we retrieved, we are going to link and display it to the list we defined earlier, this one. What we defined, we are going to link to the list we defined earlier. Add what? The new item. This is new item. The connection we opened earlier, yes, we finished now. Now we terminate. We terminate actually the pop-up, the population of this list using the reader, and we terminate the connection. The program is ended. Small summary, connection string. The event handler is a load. We have an object in the front end and the graphic. We emptied up. Then after we pass, we create a SQL, actually SQL text. Then after we specify an object to specify the connection string, then we execute the command, which is actually, we specify the command structure, which is a text based on a connection, then an object to use to populate what this query has to return, given the name reader, It is in a connected mode. It's an option. We may refer to the data set, but we have to respect the syntax and the predefined class. Here in the data reader, we are referring to the connection mode, connected mode. This reader is going to be opened here and start actually launch the execution of the SQL text after opening the connection. Then we make a test. If it's not empty, we execute a block. What is the block? It is specifying the text and the value to hold it in a list item. A list item actually is a predefined code C#, this one. Text and value is going to be linked to what? To the list author we defined earlier. Here. We terminate this reader. Here it is. And we terminate this connection. Here it is. What we opened here. That's it. That's it. The disconnected mode, now if we were using actually the same solution if we were about to build the same solution, we would use the data set instead of the data reader. We would use the data set instead of data reader. Remember that the data set would enhance the disconnected connection and the disconnected memory access, let's say, or data access. What does it mean? It means we are going to set up an object to control inside the front end to reach the data once needed only. The connection would start and retrieve the data or just insert the data and then after disconnect. It will not keep the connection alive since the application is running. No. Since the application is running, the connection is alive for the connected mode. Disconnected mode, no. The connection would actually be the connection will be set until the data is retrieved, and then after immediately would be actually terminated. Yes, exactly. So the connection actually would not would actually reduce the time consumed when dealing with the back end by using the local memory. It would avoid by going and coming back and forth from the front end to the back end, and to utilize the local memory, the local client memory to store the data once, and later on to utilize to render it and display to the end user. Any questions here, please? I believe that it's clear. Immediately I'll pass data adapter and its properties. Update example. Yeah, you come back actually to the subject. It's a program explaining the use of those two, the data reader and data set. The use of the both data reader and data set. You refer to that. If you hear your name, please just say yes. If you hear your name, please say yes. By the way, all is included to your intern next class. And the assignment, I had so many questions. You have to submit it through the Moodle. You submit the assignment through the Moodle, please. If you hear your name, please say yes.